Welcome to BRICS Africa channel, and thank you for taking time to speak to us. I know you were at Russia Energy Week, and now you are in Africa Energy Week.
Yes.
What is a distinct difference from the conversations you've had in Russia with your BRICS member states and the Africa, as you were saying in your speech, meeting with the vision of Kwame Nkrumah?
Well, first is that the BRICS member states are dominant market players in the energy ecosystem. And some of them are sitting with significant financial resources to be able to finance their own transition, their own ambition. And the second distinguishing characteristics of the BRICS and the rest of the continent is that they already have the technology. So the Brazilians on hydro, the green interventions, they are leading the Chinese, the Russians, and also the Indians, far advanced in regards to new technologies, clean coal, issues around solar PV. They have some of the biggest utility scale interventions in relation to some of those energy sources. So they are doing it, they are not necessarily talking about it. So I think that's a very big distinction between us and them. And then the level of energy access amongst the citizens in those countries significantly advanced. And we know that for historical reasons, Africa is still lagging behind. 600 million people on the continent don't have access to electricity. But we also know that there are advantages here. They don't come, some of them, they come naturally as a result of the endowment. 10% of the global oil reserves on the continent, 7% of known reserves gas on the continent, 40% potential of renewable energy exploitation on the continent. The rare earth minerals, the PGM, lithium, cobalt, copper, that are going to power, if what I refer to as a battery technology, the battery economy rather. The majority of them are found here. And then we've got also the demographics. The most youthful population is here, but that doesn't translate into a demographic dividend, because it's a dividend once you can exploit it in favor of your own objective. And it needs to be skilled, it needs to be provided opportunities, and we know that those are in short supply. And in fact can be a demographic case, because these are the same people. If they are living in conditions of hunger, destitution, they are not getting opportunities, they can mount a revolt against a sitting government. So it's important that we are able to find a way of how best do you harness, if you like, this endowment. How do you draw on the demographic dividend? So these are the conversations that we ought to be having here. It must be coordinated, it must be orchestrated, so that there's an appreciation that we are sitting with this endowment. It is in our interest to align, if you like, what our approaches are. Otherwise, we'll be pitted against each other. So people with money coming into the various countries and promise heaven and earth, exploit those resources, take them out, and people continue to live in conditions of destitution. So it's important that we are able to coordinate those interventions and we are able to pull as one. So those are the conversations that are happening. But we must get to a stage of doing. So we've been talking and talking and talking.
And what are the obstacles that are making in order to get to that stage?
Well, you need leadership, political leadership. So this is a form of self-criticism. And I'm talking about the overall, the continent. We see that in South Africa, we're moving with regards to the reforms on the energy side. I think it ought to be happening in other parts of the continent. We are not about to dictate. People understand their own nuances, set of domestic circumstances. But it's important that we are able to introduce interventions that makes it possible for us to be able to exploit our own endowments in favor of our own development and affirming our own people, taking them out of conditions of destitution and allowing the country, the respective jurisdictions, the sovereign jurisdictions to grow in a manner that is inclusive.
Sure.
We are able to broaden the manufacturing and manufacturing base. We are able to introduce the kind of skills that are necessary to participate in that new economy.
Sure.
Like I said, we have an advantage of the demographic profile, a very youthful population. So it must be placed to use, and it is those reforms that will help us to resolve that.
You did touch on the policy harmonization, and I ask myself, is Pan-African Parliament, are there discussions, are there other platforms where practically the harmonization of policies. I mean, we've seen even with the Africa Free Trade. Yes, we've rectified most of the countries, but the question becomes, this was 2 years ago.
No, absolutely.
Where are we now?
And that's the point I'm making about leadership. And leadership in this instance is about speed,
Sure.
understanding the consequences of not moving fast, appreciating that we need to be pulling together. Yes, we are at the various levels of development at speed, but at least even the slowest movers must be at a pace that allows us, at
Sure.
least in the near future, to take advantage of these opportunities. I know that our delegates that are in the parliament are advancing the case
Sure.
for Africa to pull together, coordinate. So there must be some degree of alignment on how we want to take advantage of these opportunities. Otherwise, no, you are going
Sure.
to find development that is extremely asymmetrical, that is skewed. It's not, I want to emphasize. Of course, as a jurisdiction, as South Africa, we can celebrate the fact that we've got energy, while attaining energy security, we have resolved load shedding, confident that they will not be, we're close to resolving it. But we still have a challenge in Zambia. We still have a challenge in Mozambique where people are not necessarily, they haven't attained the levels of access that we have. So it's important that we are able to pull everyone together. So I think it's a height of folly to suggest that we are living in a bubble. I think we are interconnected. And the idea of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is exactly that. Intra-trade mobility of manufactured and finished goods. The idea around critical minerals, beneficiate them as source. So it don't help us if South Africa takes that position and others don't take a similar position. So it's fine, they'll leave you alone. The big players will come into the place.
Is South Africa playing that leadership role? I mean, you've got one of the progressive integrated resource plan, I think of 2019. And yet we saw you moving forward with other technologies, and then suddenly you went back to stretch and saying, okay, you're going to go back to the stakeholders and find out about how we're going to be buying. I think it was a nuclear technology that you were moving on. Where are we? Are we moving fast enough in that regard?
Well,
do you think we still have to consult so many people?
Well, first, we are not moving fast enough, so that's the point. And that's why it's something that we need to improve on. The second one is that there were inherent challenges in the process that we had followed, which were fatal, and we are going to be exposed in court. And we know the previous attempt was soiled by allegations of corruption. You need to provide confidence in the process. The public must know that there is nothing to hide. We are transparent about this process. It is in our interest to ensure that the process is transparent. Of course, there will be people asking questions, but whenever questions are asked, we are able to answer that question. We are proceeding. Nuclear is part of the mix, so the IRP is very clear. It's part of the mix. It's not failing on the technical side. So you can see major jurisdictions, the UK just the other day, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer makes the point, Jeremy Hunt, that 25% of generated capacity in the UK will be coming from nuclear. We know that globally there's anything between 50 to 70 concepts of SMR that are under various stages of deployment. I think the Chinese are the only ones that I know of that have moved to deployment. What's the point I'm making? Is that the world has come to accept that nuclear is going to be a major anchor of energy supply demand, or if you like, meeting demand. And the fact that the SMR gives you that degree of agility, deployment closer to load centers. So the kind of cooling technology doesn't need you to locate close to the sea. So it's deployable all over in small packages. It's modular. So there's that scalability, there's that agility. Of course, we're waiting on these concepts to reach an advanced stage. But for now, we'll stick with the tried and tested technology to ensure that we're able to exploit it. But the process is important. We mustn't discredit the program as a result of the flaws in the process, and those things we can control. Of course, it's a delay of about 6 months, but the nature of nuclear, we've seen Quebec, 40 years of uninterrupted incident-free operation. We've gotten 20-year extension on unit number 1, confident about unit number 2. In the US, they've got the extension of life of 40 years. So we know that, in a course of 60 years, just losing six months, it's fine. We can accommodate that for as long as the process is credible. That's very important.
Thank you, Minister, for joining us in BRICS Africa.
Thanks.